Good day, and thank you for joining us. We're here from the Clarion Drone Academy, and today we're going to be talking about Transport Canada's rules and the regulations for the use of drones in Canada. Really, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about what you need to know before you fly. Just a little bit about us, though. We're going to talk about the company intro, some Transport Canada regs for commercial UAVs, the UAV commercial applications. Going to be talking about some industry news and some questions as well. So let's get started. The history of Clarion Drones really started with the history of Skyhunter 406. We are an avionics company. We have been around since 1978, serving special needs of general and business aviation. We work generally with corporate operators, but also commercial and regional airlines as well. We are a Transport Canada approved maintenance facility and also a manufacturing facility as well, and have been so for a number of years under their quality assurance programs. Under those particular companies, we have been building emergency locator transmitters, sometimes known as the black box. We're the only Canadian manufacturer of such avionics products. We have distributors and service centers all over the world, and now in the last couple of years or so, we've been moving into the drone or the unmanned aviation field of technology. And that's where we find ourselves today. But really what we're here today to do is we're here to talk about these types of drones, the drones that we see in the news and in the media all of the time. So this is what we're really trying to do. Let's start off with what we call the quadcopter revolution. And it really started when, like this picture depicts, there are 4 blades, 4 props on it. And they become, or have become, fairly inexpensive. They're easy to operate and fly, and you can buy them from just about anywhere. Some of the basic quadcopter controls look something like this radio control box here. With the 2 control sticks, there's a bit of a display screen on the bottom that can show you some of the navigation on the particular aircraft you're flying. And here's something that I thought was quite interesting. It was taken directly off of the web about a DJI Phantom, a very large company. But the very last line that I really liked to take a look at here was "Learn to fly in 10 minutes." And I kind of tell people that's like saying, we're going to drive a car today, and you get into the car, and there's a steering wheel, and there's a gas, and there's a brake pedal, and it's fairly easy to learn to drive, and you can do that in about 10 minutes. Now, yes, you can learn to drive in about 10 minutes, just as in you can learn to fly one of these in about 10 minutes, but can you do it safely? Would you be able to avoid an obstacle? Would you be able to purposely direct the car, or in this case, the aircraft, in the way that you need to at a moment that you need to do it? And that's where it takes some training and a lot of practice. I'm just wondering if anybody out there has ever seen anything like this. And these types of videos and pictures have been popping up all over YouTube and on the internet as people fly their drones and unmanned aircraft all over their cities and towns and start taking pictures like this. Just kind of wondering out there, just for all of you to really kind of think about how, have you ever flown a drone or an unmanned aerial vehicle? Do you own one? Think about how easy it was to fly. And generally the responses I get when we do this as a live presentation is that people generally say, yes, they were easy to fly until it crashed or until we had an issue, which is really kind of what we're going to be talking about today. But also, what are the current rules and regulations here in Canada? And if you want to fly your drone and you want to fly it for fun or for business, what are the rules that kind of surround those things? So if you want to fly it for fun, there are some rules and some guidelines that Transport puts out. But if you want to use it for what Transport Canada discusses as non-recreational use, or really it's business use, the current regs that we had up until about a year ago, if that, were the only way that you could fly was you had to fill out what they call an SFOC, or Special Flight Operating Certificate. And up until late last fall in 2015, the government had a set of what they called exemptions that they published. And so they were saying that if you met the exemptions, you would not have to fill out an SFOC. But here is where the very last line, and we say here, if you don't fit within the exemptions, you must still fill out an SFOC. And so what we're going to be discussing today is that for any kind of aviation non-recreational use. So if you want to use your drone as a wedding photographer, as a real estate agent, you want to use it to photograph pictures for the newspaper or media. You want to use the pictures or videos in some business fashion or format, then that falls into a business use. And what we're going to discuss today is that the exemptions for the most part don't work anywhere, really virtually anywhere that we tend to be working. So therefore you always have to fill out an SFOC, which is a special application to the government. But let's carry on and we're going to discuss that. First of all, let's talk about the exemptions that were brought into effect here at, I guess that was the summer of 2015. And with these exemptions, people generally thought that they were exempt from doing anything with the government and they could fly their drone for commercial purposes. Well, the government broke it down into two various weight classes. One of them was not exceeding 2 kilograms, and the other one was exceeding 2 kilograms. So they have smaller drones, and then they have larger drones over 2 kilos up to 25. So those could be fairly large. Now, for the smaller ones that weren't exceeding 2 kilograms, what the government said is that, for non-recreational UAVs not exceeding the 2 kilos, they wanted you to stay away from built-up areas and controlled airspace, aerodromes and airports, and forest fire areas. But once again, we highlight at the bottom of the screen, if you're conducting outside the terms and conditions of the exemption itself, any one of the exemptions don't work, then they all don't work, and you always have to fill out a special flight operating certificate. Here is an example from 3D Robotics. In this particular example, we're showing 3D Robotics Iris. What we really kind of want to draw your attention to is the weight with battery marked in red, where it's almost 1,300 grams or about 1.3 kilos. So it falls into the smaller under 2 kilo weight class. And in this particular case, that is without the gimbal and the camera, but it still falls. Once you add the camera, as in the picture in the gimbal, it falls under the 2 kilo mark. So this particular aircraft could fall under the 2 kilo, and it falls into one set of rules. And then we have the larger unmanned aerial vehicles or drones that exceed the 2 kilos but not the 25. The same set of rules apply here. Don't fly it in built-up areas, controlled airspace, controlled aerodromes or airports, and forest fires. And once again, if you can't do that and you want to fly it in any one of those areas, then you need an SFOC. An example from 3D Robotics is the X8 Plus. And in this particular one here, the vehicle weight with the battery is almost 2.6 kilos, so it clearly falls into the upper category of the exemption weight class, from 2 kilos to 25. Almost looks the same as the previous aircraft that we looked at, but once again it has the dual props and it's a little heavier. So how do these two differ, not just physically, but within the regulations? Well, first of all, let's take a look at some of the general conditions that have to be met if we're flying commercially. You have to be a minimum of 18 years of age. You have to have a minimum of $100,000 in liability insurance, which for the most part, $100,000 really doesn't give you a whole lot of coverage. The pilots shouldn't be operating within 8 hours after consuming alcohol. And if these exemptions actually work for you, then you need to print a copy of these exemptions and keep them on you at all times while flying your aircraft. And then at any time, if you're ever approached by a police officer or a peace officer or even a Transport Canada inspector, you have to be able to produce these documents and show them that you're following the letter of the law. There's also some flight conditions that Transport lays out as well. One of the first exemptions or flight conditions is that you have to maintain continuous unaided visual contact. That means visual line of sight. This means that the drone cannot be flying so far that you can't see it. So just like in the second one here, the second picture, there's a guy on the left wearing these funny looking goggles. And those are what we call first-person view devices. They're a set of goggles with miniature TV screens on the inside. And the picture on the right displays a picture that's being transmitted back from the drone itself. So as you're flying your drone, you can have a picture as if you're piloting on board the aircraft transmitted back to the goggles, and they call those first-person view. This technology is not permitted in any kind of commercial application here in Canada. Now, the other thing is too, number 3, you have to only operate during daylight hours. Number 4, at or below 300 feet, which is about 90 meters. And the last one is that you have to operate in Class G airspace. Well, for those of you that don't know what Class G airspace is, Class G is set up as anything up to 1,200 feet above ground level. That is Class G. Now, as you can see on the right side of the diagram, there are some circles built into this diagram, one labeled for Class E, the smaller one, and then the larger one is also a Class E, which drops to the ground around some airports. What this really shows us is that even though technically and legally we're only allowed to fly up to 90 meters, Class G goes up to 1,200 feet. But around various airports and government buildings and other structures, that airspace can change unless you know how to read maps and determine when it changes, so that it changes to a different classification of airspace, which means it's controlled, and therefore drones cannot be flying into them. So what's another thing that we need to take a look at here? So let's take a look at the maximum takeoff. So for 2 kilos, but not exceeding 25. So these are for the larger ones that we're talking about in the exemptions. And it's saying to us the government wants us to be at least 5 nautical miles or 9 kilometers from any aerodrome. That's any airport, any air grass strip, anything that is labeled as an aerodrome. 5 nautical miles or 9 clicks from a built-up area. 500 feet from the general public and spectators, bystanders. And you're not supposed to fly over an open-air assembly of persons or over highways or busy roads. And for these larger aircraft as well, they now want you to get into using checklists and placards and have a handheld fire extinguisher with you when you're on these particular missions. Now, being in the aviation industry as long as we have been, what number 5 with the checklists and placards really starts to indicate is that on these larger sets of unmanned aircraft or drones, the government really treats these as an aircraft. And because they fall into Canadian airspace, they are. Which means now that you're operating these as an aircraft as well. So let's go on to the next one here. Now for the smaller drones, for the things that do not exceed the 2 kilos. Well, look at this. It looks virtually the same. We have to stay at least 5 nautical miles or 9 kilometers from any airport or aerodrome. We have to be 5 nautical miles or 9 clicks from any built-up area. And now we only have to be 100 feet away from buildings and structures and people, anything where we might be, around people or somebody that might actually get injured. We have to be 100 feet away. And, of course, not operate over an open-air assembly. So, now we had talked about all of these things, but there's item number 2, and we talk about operating away 9 kilometers from a built-up area. Now, we had kind of skipped over that part, but I want to really discuss it here. When they talk about a built-up area is not left for us to define. It's actually defined in a particular document called Advisory Circular 600-004. And in here, what they talk about, a built-up area, they're considered any area within a group of buildings or dwellings, including anything from a small hamlet to a major city. Anything larger than a farmstead should be considered a built-up area. So I want you all to take for a moment and think about the fact of where you want to fly your drone or what it is that you were thinking of doing with your particular aircraft. And if you can draw a big circle 9 kilometers around that, and if there's anything more than a farmstead within that particular 9-kilometer circle, you are now in a built-up area. That is a built-up area. And so for most of the country, when we're doing our work, we are always in a built-up area. Even if we're in the country, there are other farms and other buildings located within the 9 kilometers. It is defined as a built-up area. Therefore, the exemptions do not work, and you must always fill out your special flight operating certificate. Here was an example a year ago. In December of 2014. There was a bar in Las Vegas, and they were serving drinks with drones. You can see the operator in the front, in this large octocopter overhead carrying a bucket of alcohol, champagne. And the patrons at the bar could text the bar, and the drone operator would bring this bucket of booze over top of all of these people at the bar. And so the question kind of at this point is, even though this is an American picture and the rules are very different from here at home in Canada, if we could apply these same set of Canadian rules to this particular situation, how many violations do you see? Well, an octocopter, as big as it is with 8 blades, is very heavy. It falls into the larger set of rules or exemptions that we were just talking about. And we have to stay a minimum of 500 feet away from buildings and people. We're not supposed to fly over crowds at all. And also in the Vegas downtown strip, there's also an airport nearby as well. So it easily falls within the 9 kilometers or 5 miles to the nearest airport. So there are a number of violations if this was to fall into Canadian space. So one of the other areas that transport also discusses is pilot training. So what do you need? So on a very small drone, anything under the 2 kilos, what kind of training do you need? Well, transport says you should be appropriately trained and qualified. Well, what does appropriately trained mean? All we can really say at this point is that if you ever have an issue or a problem, the problem or the incidences always fall back onto the pilot in command or the person flying their aircraft, and therefore it'll be deemed that you were probably not appropriately trained. For larger drones, anything over the 2 kilo, up to the 25, transport says that you must have successfully completed a pilot ground school program. And they lay out what you must know within that or have taken within that pilot ground school program. And therefore you have to be qualified, tested, and approved and have that particular knowledge before you go flying. Now, one of the other documents that transport also lays out are the knowledge requirements for pilots of vehicles under the 25 kilos. So if you're taking a ground school, here is the absolute bare minimum knowledge requirements that you must be taking in your class and know to be able to fly your drone legally for any kind of commercial purposes anywhere in Canada. There's an awful lot to be covered. Now the other thing is that transport also lays out system conditions to be able to fly. And so for the smaller drones, all they really say is that just make sure that they're fit in a safe state to fly before you take off. And for the larger drones, they tend to lay out a few more things that they want you to check and to make sure that you know about. And of course it has to be in a fit and a safe state. But now you also have to start tracking all of your maintenance and your servicing and your disassembly and your assembly procedures. Everything has to be tracked and cataloged as if it is a real aircraft, because it is a real aircraft. It falls within that realm. And you also have to make sure that people that are doing the work are also trained or that have the proper authorization to be able to do so. So we're just going to take a really quick test here. And mind you, we're just going to have you think about this. So if here in Canada, if we were going to be taking some pictures of a property for real estate, do you require an SFOC to photograph this property? And really what it is it's a trick question. And the trick part of it is that remember that any kind of UAV operations conducted outside the terms and conditions of this exemption that we've been talking about, if it doesn't meet all of the exemption requirements, then it does need an SFOC. So for the most part, 99.9% of the time in real estate, for example, you will always require a special flight operating certificate be pre-approved by transport before you actually run your mission. Now it is possible that you were doing something remotely in the far Arctic or north where there are no other buildings around, and maybe there is a particular property that you're photographing for real estate, and in that particular case the exemptions may work. But for the most part, 99% of the time or greater, the exemptions never work for real estate. Now, how about this one here? How about if you wanted to use your drone for video work, for, say, a journalism story? You know, you're going to be flying near buildings, probably over people or near people as well. Do you require an SFOC? Well, once again, the exemptions tell us that we can't fly near or over people or over busy roads. And at the same time, if we're within, 9 kilometers of a built-up area, once again, we can't fly. So therefore, an SFOC is always required for this type of work. Now, there was a poor fella here. It was just over a year ago. He had done some work photographing for a buddy of his who was a real estate agent. He was photographing a particular property. That property pictures got posted up onto the real estate website, where in fact Transport Canada was alerted to these pictures and traced it back to this drone operator who pleaded ignorance and said he did not know. Now, he was given a very small fine at $1,000. Very fortunate, quite frankly. Those fines can be as high as about $25,000 on your first offense. So for those that are out there doing this illegally, be forewarned. So quickly, some of the applications, and these applications change almost on a daily basis. So whatever you see up here on the screen is quickly changing, from building inspections, search and rescue, crop inspections, journalism. We do wildlife and surveillance. There are just so many things to take a look at. One of the ones here quickly was building inspections. So even building demolitions, as in a picture on the left, for project managers reviewing that, and for real estate agents wanting to get a picture of a house like on the right as well. These types of pictures can give much more information in a very short period of time and also do it fairly inexpensively. Construction site inspections are also a growing business area for drones right now, whereas in the past, project managers and foremen on site would always have to go out, wander the site to find out what work has been done or not been done, and now UAVs can actually be doing that kind of work. Yes, of course, we had mentioned the real estate photography. That one is really getting quite big. Now, here I just want to show you a video from Transport Canada. We're just going to get a chance to watch this. And this is something that Transport Canada produced on drones and UAV safety and what you should know before you actually fly. And what you're going to notice is that there is limited information within this video as compared to what we're actually discussing within our video. So just watch this and then we'll carry on. It's only a couple of minutes.
Often marketed as toys or drones, unmanned aircraft must be used safely and legally. Keep these basic safety guidelines in mind when flying your aircraft. First, use your aircraft during the day and in good weather. It's important that you can see your aircraft at all times. If it's dark or the weather is bad, you won't be able to maintain visual line of sight. An onboard camera is not a substitute for keeping your aircraft in plain sight. Respect people's privacy. Don't fly over backyards without permission. Keep your aircraft at a low altitude, no more than 90 meters off the ground. Stay at least 9 kilometers away from airports, aerodromes, and heliports. Avoid flying over places with large groups of people like sporting events and concerts, as well as highways and busy streets. Make sure your aircraft is fit for flight and always check your battery to ensure your aircraft can get back to you safely. Finally, you may need permission to fly. Be aware of the conditions and apply in advance to avoid a fine. For more safety tips and details about when you need permission to fly, visit us today.
Well, there you go. That's a nice quick video by Transport Canada. Let's just see if we can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that we're also going to talk about too here quite quickly is our small UAV professional pilot courses. So, it's one of the things that we're realizing by going through this video and discussing the various rules and regulations is that there are courses that you need to take, and this is precisely what we do. We have various training options. We actually host small UAV professional pilot courses. We do hands-on learning, indoor flight center for hands-on training with the drones themselves. And then we also do an in-class and online courses for our ground school portion as well. And we also have some hybrid courses where the online is mostly completed. About 80 or 85% is completed online through our online learning courses. And the last 15 or 20% or so is completed in a one-day class with exams and review and some hands-on work as well. There are various options. Now, the course curriculum is the same as what is laid out in the knowledge requirements document that we discussed earlier from Transport Canada. And the course curriculum in black is all covered in the online work, and it's only when we do the in-class work that we actually cover the two blue ones for mission planning and execution and flight exercises. So some of the training summaries that we have is, we have the full ground school. We actually do the restricted radio license that you're also going to require. We cover all the Canadian aviation regulations and human factors. We can even do flight testing with the hobby drones in the classroom. And we take care of everything that needs to be done for Transport Canada's approval on that particular part. And quickly, some of the changes that are happening for 2016, for this year. It came out last May 28th of 2015. There's a Notice of Proposed Amendment, or the NPA. And the government's proposing we're going to be changing some terminology that we're going to be talking about here quickly. But really what's happening is we're talking about these new changes because of what's been happening with the Special Flight Operating Cert and the application process. What we've really discovered through the video so far is that 99% of the time, the exemptions don't work. So therefore, a Special Flight Operating Certificate is always going to be required to do any kind of commercial flying whatsoever. But what's happening is that our government is being overwhelmed by these particular applications, as you can see here, over 2012 through 2014. And the increase was 485%. We don't have the numbers for 2015 at this point, but I would imagine they're at least triple the 2014 figures. And that is because we've had people that have been reckless and negligent in flying their UAVs. We see examples of this all the time in the news. And Transport Canada is trying to bring in new regulations so that we can all work together. Some of these proposed rules would apply to all operations of unmanned aircraft. At this point, they want to differentiate in weight class, but there still will be training and rules that will apply to absolutely everybody. Some of the people that the new rules will not apply to are for very large UAVs, anything over 25 kilos, anything that's also beyond visual line of sight, mostly military type work or things like that. If you have an indoor or underground UAV operation, they won't be covered by these new regulations either. And kites and rockets and unmanned free balloons, things like that, that really don't fall within these particular guidelines. Some of the new terms, and you'll see it on our website at clariondrones.com, is the very last one, RPAS, Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. We have been used to the word drones and also the acronym UAV, or Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. But those are all changing to come in line with the international standards and terms as other countries are already using. And here was a document that Transport published late in 2015 about the possibility for these new proposed amendments and changes. In the middle column, for small UAVs for limited operations, this is generally what we're doing right now with the Special Flight Operating Certificate. And for small UAVs for complex is what we're all really working towards. So we'll be having all of our training for ground schools, we'll be having our hands-on training and testing with the aircraft, and we all will be licensed or at least permitted pilots in command to fly our drones for work. And even for very small drones, even for small hobby drones, there's still going to be some kind of basic knowledge test, and there's going to have to be some kind of identification placed onto the drones themselves. So that's who we are. You know, we host professional pilot learn how to fly courses. We do the ground school. We have everything even at our online facility. We can also train and teach at your place of business. We do the SFOC application service and consulting. There is no particular application form that Transport has laid out for an SFOC. So if you go to fill out one of these and you can't find it, that's because it doesn't exist. You have to actually create it with the knowledge and knowing how to read the Transport Canada website. Now, How does all this apply to you, and where do you think it will be taking you in your career in the future? And I have a really short video that I just want to show you, and this is something that you may never thought of using a drone or an unmanned aircraft for, but somebody has. So here is one of the possibilities. It's about 2 minutes in length. Well, there we go. That is a very interesting particular application. So as you can see, there are many places for unmanned aerial vehicles, or RPAS systems, and drones. My name is Bruce McPherson. We're here at Clarion Drones. We're here to help you with any of your questions. So give us a shout or give us an email call here as well. And if there's anything that we can do for you, we would be glad to help you with that. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching.